Continuing to study in Yacov, and we're in the segment where we now talk about David's harp. It says, "Arise at midnight to praise you for your just rules." Tehillim 119:62 or Psalms 119:62. The Gemara asks, "What? David did not wake up until midnight? He was up from the evening, for it says, I rose before Neshef and cried for help." Psalms 119:147. And how do we know that Neshef means the beginning of the night? Because it says in the Neshef, in the evening of the day, in the blackness of the night, and in darkness. Proverbs chapter 7, verse 9. This proves that David was up from the beginning of the night. Then why does it say, I arise at midnight? Rabbi Hoshea said, or answered, that was what David meant to say. It never happened that midnight should pass. I should still be sleeping. It was always up well before that time. And Rabbi Zerah said until midnight he dozed like a horse. That has a light sleep. And from that point, we realize, or on that point on, he energized himself like a lion. Rabbi Ashi said until midnight he was engrossed in Torah study. And from that point on, he recited songs and praises. Now the Gemara asks, but what does Neshef mean, evening? Neshef means morning, for it says David attacked the men from Neshef until the evening of the next day. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 17. Or Aleph Shmuel 30, verse 17. Doesn't this apply from the morning until the evening? And the Neshef means morning. The Gemara counters, no, it means from the evening until the evening. Ask the Gemara, if so, the same expression should be used, and it should say from Neshef to Neshef, or from Erev to Erev. Rava said, you are right. Neshef in that verse does mean morning, but there are two kinds of Neshef. The evening Neshef, when the night is removed from the day, comes, and the morning Neshef, when the day is removed and the night comes. The Gemara raises a question. David said, I arise at midnight. How did David know exactly when midnight was? Even Moses, our teacher, did not know exactly when midnight is, for it says that Moses said to Pharaoh, in God's name, around midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt. Notice it says around midnight, and exactly it was midnight. Exodus chapter 11, verse 4, or Shemot 11:4. What does around midnight mean? Should we say that the Holy One, blessed be He, told him to tell Pharaoh that around midnight the firstborn would die? That's impossible. There is no uncertainty or approximation with God. Now, therefore, we must say that God told him exactly at midnight, but when Moses came to Pharaoh, he told him around midnight because he could not be sure exactly when midnight was. Now, if Moses was in doubt, how could David have known it? The Gemara answers, David had a sign whereby he could tell when it was midnight. For it is so said, Rabbi Abba ben Biznam, in the name of Rabbi Shimon the pious, there was a harp hanging above David's bed. And precisely when midnight arrived, a north wind came and would blow on the harp. It would play by itself, and he immediately got up and studied Torah until the break of dawn. At dawn, the sages of Israel came in to see him and said to him, our master, our king, or our master the king, Israel, your people, need sustenance. And replied David, let them go and make a living from one another. And retorted the sages, a handful cannot satisfy a lion, neither can a pit be filled with dirt you dug. Some of it gets lost, and others, in other words, the community needs outside resources to supply its need. And this is what David replied, send out the troops and attack the enemy for plunder. They immediately went out to ask Achitophel, the tactical advisor, and consulted the Sanhedrin and asked for their prayer. And they inquired the Urim and Tumim, which is what was in the breastplate, the holy name of God, in a way that they were able to tell what was the divine will, whether or not they would be victorious. And Rabbi Yosef said, what's the verse that we quote to substantiate this? And it says that after Achitophel, where Yochaidah, the son of Benaiah, and Abiathar, and the commander of the kings of the king's army was Joab. 1 Chronicles 27:34. In other words, Ahithophel was the advisor, as it says. In those days, the advice of Ahithophel was accepted, as if a man had asked advice of the word of God. Berachot 4a says, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, this means Sanhedrin. And Abiathar was a high priest of David and represented the Urim and Tumim. And it says in Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada was commander and of the Keriti and the Periti. Why the Sanhedrin is called Keriti and Periti? Keriti because their words are very decisive, Koretim, and Periti because their words are very distinctive, they're muflaim in their words. And finally, the commander of the king of the army was Joab. Notice at the order of the verse, first Ahithophel, then the Sanhedrin, then the Urim and Tumim, and finally the king's general, Joab, was the one who led the army into war. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Adas says, which verse can be cited to support the story of David's harp? And it says, awake, O my glory, awake, O harp and lyre, I will wake the dawn. Psalms 57, verse 9. Now, the Gemara now returns to the discussion of the original question as to how is it possible that David knew the exact moment of midnight and Moses did not. Rabbi Zerah said Moses certainly knew the exact time of midnight, and David did so. The Gemara asks, since David knew it, why did he need the harp to wake him up from his sleep? Since Moses knew, why did he say about midnight? The Gemara answers and says Moses thought that Pharaoh's astrologers might make a mistake in calculating the precise moment of midnight, and when the plague would not occur at the predicted hour, they would say that Moses was a liar, false prophet, as it were. No? But Rabbi has said, train your tongue to say, I don't know, because eventually you're going to make a mistake and you'll get caught. Rabbi Ashi says the time when Moses spoke was midnight between the 13th and the 14th day of Nisan. He said to Israel, the Holy One, blessed be He, said, tomorrow at the hour like the midnight of tonight, I will go into the land, I will go into the midst of Egypt. Fascinating. So we know by this in Berachot 4a that David's harp would wake him up at midnight. But although Moses did not know the exact time necessarily, God led him to do what he had to do at midnight as well. Shalom, shalom. We'll continue our studies in Yacov, and in our next video we'll be looking at David's piety and humility. Shalom, shalom.